Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's 2021 Virtual Behavioral Health Forum session. My name is Kevin McCall, and I am the supervisor of the Mclean County Triage Center. Today, I will be standing in for Behavioral Health Coordinating Council Supervisor Tricia Malott, who could not be with us this afternoon. To start, I'd like to talk for a second about the forum itself. The Mclean County Community Behavioral Health Forum is typically a one-day event consisting of multiple breakout sessions. With the ongoing global pandemic, we have adapted our in-person format, and this is now our second year holding the forum virtually. We are pleased to offer a wide variety of individual sessions related to behavioral health that will be offered through November. Please check out our website for a full listing of these sessions. We have several still remaining. All registration is free, and you can even register the same day. Sessions are held at varying times, but all presentations, including those from last year's forum, are uploaded to the Mclean County Behavioral Health YouTube page. I'll provide links for both our website and our YouTube page in the chat located on your sidebar. The idea of free community education, the highlighting of available community resources, and sharing of ideas through the Behavioral Health Forum originated out of the Mental Health Action Plan, which was adopted by the 2015 Mclean County Board. This plan originated out of more than 100 community members that identified needs and best practices related to behavioral health specific to Mclean County. In these uncertain and difficult times, we believe that it is more important than ever to help provide education, resources, encouragement, and even simply recognition of life's challenges. During today's presentation, there will be time at the end for questions. We ask that if you choose to ask a question during the presentation, that you provide enough context so that questions can be appropriately answered by our speaker at the end. So if you ask a question like, can you tell me more about that? We need you to elaborate as to what exactly it is you need to be told more about so that the question makes sense at the end of the session. Today's panel will be led by our moderator, Colleen O'Connor. Colleen is an educator and mental health professional. She initiated and coordinates Mclean County's school-based mental health education and suicide prevention program, NAMI Ending the Silence, through Project Oz and NAMI Mid-Central Illinois. In this role, she provides education to all students in public junior high schools and high schools in Mclean County. She also serves as the executive director of the local chapter of the National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI Mid-Central Illinois. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Colleen O'Connor. Thank you very much for being with us today, Colleen.
Thank you, and thank you for that introduction. So I am really excited that we get a chance today to talk about this. So there have been lots of different kinds of sessions that have been in this year's virtual forum, focusing on lots of different important topics. But today's is a little bit different because today we're going to focus on lived experience. So we know that it's important to share information about how to ask for help, but it's also really important to feel comfortable asking for help. A lot of times people are afraid to get the support that they deserve because of stigma. And we also know that one of the best ways to reduce stigma is by sharing personal stories and lived experience. So our goal today is just to talk a little bit about our own mental health, how we usually cope, how COVID-19 and the last year and a half have kind of changed the way that we cope with our mental health, and share some information to remind us all that we're not alone, even if sometimes it feels like it. So our plan for today, we're going to have everybody answer a couple questions talking about their own experiences. At the end, we're going to do a few lightning round questions just to get some quick thoughts about some additional questions. And then we're going to have an opportunity for anyone in the audience who would like to ask us a question, go ahead and share those thoughts with us. All right, so I am going to get us started with our first question. So our first question is just going to be an opportunity for our panelists to introduce themselves. So I'd like you to please just tell us a little bit about you. And I will start with Morgan.
Hi. My name is Morgan Rondinelli, and I am a writer, former biologist turned writer, and I am working on an MFA in creative nonfiction, and I really write a lot about mental health, and that's helped me process that. I also do a lot of community theater, And I have a cat that I am super in love with and obsessed with, who will probably make an appearance. Yeah, and in terms of mental health, I guess my primary diagnosis is probably OCD. But I also have experience with depression and borderline personality disorder.
All right, thank you, Morgan. Kat, if we can jump to you.
Hey everybody, my name is Kat Hayes. I'm a certified medical assistant. I am currently working as a project coordinator with Chestnut Health Systems to help them develop an organization to help with the opioid epidemic that has really gotten worse within the last year and a half due to COVID. Few things about myself. I am a major geek. I love everything superheroes, sci-fi, fantasy. That's like one of my big passions in life. Star Trek as well. I am a very creative person. I love crafting. I love creating art. I was a visual communications major before wonderful life happened in the middle of everything. As far as my diagnoses go, I have been in long-term recovery from bipolar disorder along with self-harm.
All right, thank you for sharing, Kat. We will go to Devin next.
Hello, my name is Devin Fields. I am currently a senior at ISU. My major is social work. And as far as mental health things go, I have had a hard time in the past with depression and anxiety.
All right, next we're going to hear from Amanda.
Hi, my name is Amanda. I was born and raised in Central Illinois. I lived in Oregon for 15 years and got my college degree there, started my career there. I currently work in government relations. I'm actually applying to graduate school right now to pursue my master's in social work. My free time, I love to watch documentaries. I love to read creative nonfiction, and before 2020, I love to travel.
Awesome. All right, and Sarah.
Hi, I'm Sarah Stalter. I'm a certified recovery support specialist with the Mclean County Fuse program. I have been working in the field for about 4 years now, and a RAP facilitator, a wellness recovery action plan, a mental health first aid instructor. I've dealt with mental health things pretty much my entire life. Some diagnoses, depression, anxiety, PTSD. So it's something I'm very passionate about. And so I've kind of made it my career, I guess. So I'm going back to get my master's currently in social work, and I'm very excited to continue in that. For fun, I kickbox, I read, I binge a lot of TV shows with my husband, and I'm one of those nerds that I really like doing like genealogical research and stuff. So that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. Thank you all for telling us a little bit about you as people. In general, I'm not going to answer all of these questions myself, but I do want to share that one of the reasons I'm coordinating or moderating this panel today is because I also have lived experience primarily with depression, anxiety, and ADHD. So everyone on the screen today knows what it's like to struggle with their mental health. So speaking of which, our next question, can you tell us a little bit specifically about your experiences with mental health and mental illness? That could be things like when you started struggling, how it's impacted you in the past, or how it's impacting you now. All right, Morgan, you're up.
Okay. So I was diagnosed with OCD at 19 after my freshman year of college, but I'm pretty sure I've had it my whole life. I have memories from preschool, from kindergarten. It goes all the way back, and sort of retroactively I can identify how it's impacted my life. But unfortunately, it's really common for OCD to go undiagnosed for decades or more. So when I went to college, it sort of exploded into, I was terrified I was going to start a fire accidentally. I was terrified I was going to die. I was having all these intrusive thoughts, and I was perfectionistic about homework, and it had always kind of been like that. But when I went, I think the transition of being away from everything made it explode. And so I started Googling things late at night, and I found blog posts where people had the exact same thoughts that I had. And I ended up seeing someone who knew more about OCD, and she was like, yeah, you definitely have OCD. But what was cool was then I started my own blog to sort of share all those experiences that I'd been keeping secret for 10, 12 years. And then I had depression in high school too, and I was seeing a therapist. She just never asked about OCD, so I never brought it up. And I didn't have the language for it either. But it wasn't really until college, again, that it sort of escalated to hospitalizations and really severe depression. And thankfully, I'm doing really well now, though. I've been doing really well for 3-ish years, thanks to therapy and medication and all sorts of good supports. So yeah, I feel pretty good. I still do like maintenance therapy just to keep things in check, but I feel pretty good.
Awesome, thank you. All right, and Kat.
My diagnosis of bipolar came at a very young age as compared to what the normal is. I was diagnosed at 13 due to being a very classic rapid cycler. From there, we went through the wonderful trial and error process that is finding the right treatment through my junior high and high school years. College was trying to figure out how to make college work successfully for me. And I eventually did get in with a good psychiatrist who got me on lithium. And I got into visual communications, loved it. And then in the middle of everything, came to Central Illinois to visit family in January of 2016. And I found out I had lithium toxicity that caused major kidney damage. So from there, it was spending 2016 through now, rebuilding my life, taking care of health issues, also figuring out what I wanted to do because I just lost the drive for doing graphic design work. And that brought me here, completing education for the medical assistant program and for being a phlebotomist. The biggest thing I've had to deal with this year is it hasn't been COVID that's impacted my mental health. I dealt with my last position, workplace bullying that pushed me to the point of it was a hostile work environment, and I relapsed into self-harm for the first time in 5 years, and I'm still kind of recovering from that.
Thanks for sharing that with us, Kat. All right, and next we've got Devin.
Okay, so I will say depression and anxiety both started for me probably around 13, 14, right as I was those years of transitioning to high school. I had just my father in my life for a long time and didn't really understand why until around the age of 13 or 14. And so didn't really go, I went undiagnosed all through high school just because I was always like very like lively on the outside. I'm a real social bug. Like if you were around me around that time, you probably wouldn't think that anything was wrong with me. I went undiagnosed until my sophomore year of college because I had just started living by myself and I was alone more, so it was more of a focus for me. And so far it's impacted my life because it impacted a lot of personal relationships I had, friends and with family, because I didn't know how to deal with coping. So it would kind of just be like lash out situations. I did try to go the medication route because I felt after evaluating my own choices that that was the best thing for me. Tried about 4 or 5 different meds, didn't work. And I just decided, you know what, I'm gonna stick it out and try to do what I need to do personally because I don't want to become an experiment. Now I would say it doesn't really, it impacts my life, but I try to put it in the back seat and leave it there, because I know that what I have planned for my future is more important to me than what happened in the past. So.
All right, thank you, Devin. And Amanda.
So I started sort of my intense focus on a mental health recovery path in 2017 when I had a hospitalization and was diagnosed with a mood disorder. Sort of the opposite of Kat, I was diagnosed I'm in my mid 40s, so much older than people normally are diagnosed. After that hospitalization, I certainly didn't think there was anything wrong, didn't really engage in a mental health recovery path for another couple of months. And then just sort of had this realization that like something was off with me and I wasn't feeling the way that I wanted to feel. I wasn't acting the way that I wanted to act. And it was really, really scary. It's probably one of the scariest things that's ever happened to me in my life. But I really dug in, and I know what you're talking about, Devin, about feeling like a science experiment. I went through that for a really long time, and it took, you know, suffering for a couple of years and trying many different cocktails until I finally went to an IOP, PHP, and you know, sort of found that magical cocktail for me of medication and skills-based stuff. And I've been doing pretty well since, you know, 2019, but, you know, it was a rough 2 years. But I think before that, before 2017, you know, I did counseling for sort of situational things. And unlike Morgan, I still haven't really sorted out when it started. You know, I've looked sort of back on my life and tried to find like those breadcrumbs of evidence. But that's something that I'm still figuring out.
Thank you. All right, and Sarah.
So I first started dealing with some of my mental health struggles when I was pretty young. There were some signs there, some anxiety and OCD symptoms, but at the time, really realized what was going on. As I became a teenager, you know, it's really easy to think that you're going through like, you know, that teenage phase. And so I just kind of kept it to myself. In my head, I just told myself I was crazy, which is a word I'm trying to just remove from my vocabulary because of that. And I got to college, and that was pretty, that kind of set it off. That we figured out that, you know, there was OCD, anxiety, and depression. And depression I had started being treated for a little bit towards the end of high school. But then with college, things started getting a little different and worse. And it's kind of hard to be diagnosed sometimes because a lot of symptoms look like a lot of different things. And since I had already been treated for anxiety, depression, OCD, it was recognized until just a handful of years ago that actually I was struggling with PTSD through college. And Amanda, I'm so glad you call it a cocktail, because it really is a magic cocktail when you figure out, you know, the med regime that you need to be on. But yeah, while figuring that out, that was really difficult. But luckily, yeah, for me, I go to therapy every week. I maintain things with my psychiatrist. I've gone to groups before. But in the meantime, it made just life very difficult, making friends. Even in college, just going to a professor if I was having issues was just impossible. I mean, I had a panic attack the morning of my first interview after college, like in front of my mom, just trying to get dressed and ready to go. And I ended up missing the train to go to the interview. So I have to be really cognizant of my routine, energy levels, you know, what food I'm eating, what activities I'm doing. just things could impact my mental health. It's always something in the back of my mind, that, you know, my routine and everything could really impact it. And so yeah, like I said, I'm really cognizant of it. And because of that, I'm able to, I think, maintain it pretty well, and continue to manage it through, you know, therapy and meds and things like that.
Awesome. So as I'm listening to everybody's stories, I'm just thinking about how many of these pieces kind of resonate with each other. You know, I'm hearing a lot of differences, but a lot of similarities too. So like, Sarah, I can totally relate to what you're saying about how so many of the symptoms are similar that it's hard to find exactly the right diagnosis. I was just diagnosed with ADHD this year after dealing with it my whole life, but having it classified as part of the anxiety and depression, but it took forever for them to kind of realize that something else was going on. And I think a lot of people talked about how sometimes it takes a while to figure this out. You know, a lot of issues with diagnosis, a lot of issues trying to find a medication that helps, you know, figuring out what the new version of good looks like, and how sometimes that takes a lot of trial and error. And I'm also hearing a lot of people talking about impacts on relationships and jobs and just like all of the different parts of your life that this can create an effect for. And then you guys also already started answering my next question, which is about how we take care of ourselves. So we had a lot of good information about things that you've tried so far and some of the things that are working. For this question, can you tell me a little bit about how you manage your mental health in general? So that could be types of treatment that you found useful. It could be coping skills that you do, things you try to keep in mind when you're struggling, people who support you, anything that's making it easier for you to live with your mental health condition. All right, Morgan.
Yeah, so for me, I'm lucky in that after I was diagnosed with OCD, I got the correct exposure response prevention therapy, because sometimes it can take, you know, a decade to get diagnosed and then another decade to find the right treatment. But luckily, the first therapist I saw really knew OCD. So we did lots of exposures, which is sort of just gradually facing your fears. And that's the simplest way to put it. It's a lot more complex than that, but it's about like teaching yourself that you can just basically ignore these thoughts. You don't have to engage with them. And then for big emotions, I did a lot of DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, and that was super helpful for just learning skills to regulate emotions and interpersonal skills and how to be more effective basically at handling emotions and life. And then beyond sort of the clinical side of things, I find it really helpful to stay busy, but to an extent. It's a fine line between busy and pushing too far into overstretched. So for me, evenings are the hardest part. I don't know why. My brain just starts to get really tired and I start to ruminate, and I call it existential o'clock. Right around 7, 8 p.m. is existential o'clock. It can vary based on when the sun sets. And so I find it really useful to have a box full of crafts that when existential o'clock starts, I can pull those out. I also am in a show right now, so I have rehearsal in the evenings, which helps really a lot. So that's how I maintain my mental health.
I love existential o'clock. I totally get that as well, where like you get through the day and then you're just like, what now? So I totally relate to that. Thank you, Morgan. You might have seen my cat run across the screen for a second there. That's very relevant to this question because he's one of my big coping skills. Hopefully he will sit down now. All right, and let's go to Kat.
The big thing that has been one of my mainstays for mental health is medication. That was drilled into my head when I was younger by my mom, and I am grateful for it every single day, because without my meds, I don't function at the level I want to. Also, I've done one-on-one therapy on and off throughout the years. At this point, I just do kind of maintenance on that. For my own personal coping skills and whatnot, I am a big reader. Anytime I'm tired of real life, I grab one of my fantasy novels I've picked up from the library and I go take a bath and just escape reality for a bit. I'm big into music. I have my power playlist I listen to on the way into work just to get me energized for the day. I also do crafting. I knit, I sketch, I do jewelry making. I do a little bit of everything. I can take a project, binge watch something for a couple hours and just get in that zen like state. A big thing I also do is pampering self-care, which is, you know, coloring my hair, getting nails done just because you feel better. Last couple things I'll share. I spend time with my fiance and with my best friend. My fiance actually got me into live action role play, which is a lot of fun. It's the real life version of playing pretend or tabletop gaming like D&D. We get to run around and hit each other with foam weapons, and it's very therapeutic.
These are some exceptionally cool hobbies. Like I want to learn about some of this too. All right, Devin, go ahead.
I can honestly say that as far as like taking care of my actual mental health, I did not start doing that until last year. And part of that comes from I could not find someone who knew how to help me as far as like a therapist goes. It was never like, I just felt like I was being talked to in more of like in a stern way, not a caring way about, you know, this is what's wrong with you, this is what you need to do. And that didn't really work for me. So I got my dog. He is a golden doodle. His name is Sherman. He helps a lot. I like to travel, but of course with COVID, that kind of slowed things down a little bit. But as far as my support group, it's basically been my dad and my best friend, and they've been there like every step of the way. So of course that has helped. But I do recommend like therapy, and that is why like I became a social work major, because I'm a firm believer in it. I just unfortunately have not found the right one for me yet. So
I love hearing about support people. I love hearing about the people who are there for us because I really think that they make such a huge difference. All right, and Amanda.
So similar to Kat, I think the number one thing on my list is medication management, and also just overall like what I put in my body. You know, like 100% sobriety, although I do love caffeine and I'm working on nicotine. But you know, I have my, what I call my magical cocktail, and I go and see my psychiatric nurse practitioner on a quarterly basis. She's really awesome. I've found, no offense to psychiatrists, but it's hard to find psychiatrists in Central Illinois. And I've had great luck with a psychiatric nurse practitioner who really listens to me and will work with me on dosages and that sort of thing. So I can't say enough wonderful things about her. I go to counseling on a weekly basis. That's probably something that I'll do for the rest of my life. Somebody just to check in with. Sleep is very important for me and in my self-care in general. My social supports as well. I have two really, really great dear friends, but they both live on opposite sides of the country of me and each other. But staying connected with them. I'm also really involved with NAMI Connections support groups. Those happen, there's a statewide support group on Mondays and Thursdays of every week, and they're Zoom, and I join at least once a week. I also help facilitate those, and it's a really lovely community of people that we kind of create this nice safe space for everybody to talk about their mental health in an environment that's very open, welcoming, and non-judgmental, which is really important for me and my self-care. In terms of like therapy modalities, like I love DBT as well. I also love ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy. I just started an online class called the Happiness Trap. And it's all about sort of accepting the situation that we're in and then moving towards our values. And that's really resonating with me, especially as I'm trying to quit smoking. And then overall, like I have to be really gentle with myself, you know, and not put a lot of pressure on myself. Like I tend to be a perfectionist. And I think that like I should take vitamins every day and I should do yoga every day and like all these things that I know are really, really helpful for me. But self-care can actually become like really ugly and toxic when perfectionism is added in. So just like being gentle with myself and listening to myself, and kind of trying to figure out what I need without putting too much pressure.
I love that. And I think that's something that I am trying to do a lot of work on, really trying to practice, is that my brain wants to be really mean to me. And so I have to really work to change that narrative and try to give myself space to be where I am. So I totally get you about like, here's all the million good things I could maybe do. Now pick 5, like trying not to do everything perfectly all the time. All right, and Sarah, if you can finish us off with this question.
Sure. It's really interesting you said that, Amanda, because that's the first thing I was thinking of is one of the first things I've had to do to take care of myself is work on my own acceptance of where I'm at and accept where I'm at every day. My best looks different every day. I'm a big person on sleep as well. And so I have to just, accept how I am when I wake up, but also just where I've come from, what I'm dealing with day to day. So, if I need to if I need to fidget, obviously, I'm fidgeting throughout this entire thing. That's okay. If I need to take a break, that's okay. So not only am I obnoxious about trying to reduce stigma in everybody else, but one of my big things is that I work to reduce stigma in myself. In terms of like a support network, that's something I was really quiet about for a long time, that I didn't seek it out. So I've had to do, as well as trying to have grace with myself, I have to then trust others to, tell them what's going on. So I've built a support network, with my family. My husband is the best support, and my friends, and be open with them what's going on, so that they understand when things are a little harder. I utilize therapy every week. We go through internal family systems, which has been really fun. If you can say that something is fun in therapy, I guess. I maintain meds. I've used groups. I've gone through EMDR therapy before. That was really interesting and very helpful. And some of those coping strategies that I just do on my own, because of the nature of trauma, because I'm a complete nerd, it's really physical. It stays physically in your body. So I have to do a lot of grounding things, a lot of things to move my body. So like sometimes it's just putting my hands under cold water. I kickbox, might have already said that. I do strength training, a lot of self-care things where I'm present in my body. But I also just try and keep up with my routine, maintain some social connections like within my religious community, things like that. I actually keep like a little go-to list if I can't think of what to do in my wallet of like, hey, these are some have you tried this yet? Just as like a extra just in case. And then like doing those coping strategies like reading. I have a giant Malamute puppy that when all else fails, cuddling with him is like the best boost of whatever chemicals it does in the brain and whatnot. So I guess that's a little bit of what I do to take care of myself.
I think this might be my favorite question so far because it's just really cool to hear about all of the different strategies that everybody uses. It also makes me think of just how much work it is to take care of your mental health. Like, I feel like sometimes I feel like I have a second full-time job just trying to take care of myself. And I think that goes along with the like pushing yourself too hard and perfectionism of sometimes I forget, like, no wonder I'm tired because like I'm doing all this stuff. And like hearing everybody talk about all of the things everybody does to try to be okay, I just kind of want to acknowledge that like this is a lot of stuff that we're doing. And yeah, I think that's cool. All right, last question for everyone, and then we'll go to our lightning round. So we've talked about how mental health affects you in general and how you cope in general. This last question is specific to the last year and a half and everything that's been going on with COVID. So I'd like to know how COVID has impacted your mental health. So that could be, you know, were there times during COVID that were extra difficult for you? Was there anything that was helpful, like things that became easier as we shifted to a virtual environment? Were there coping skills you had to change because you couldn't use them the way that you usually did? Just any impact that it's had on your life for the last year and a half or so. All right, Morgan?
Yeah, for the most part, I don't think it's had a huge impact just because by the time COVID started, I had that really solid foundation of where I was and being stable. And I also really like staying home. That sounds kind of silly, but it can become, okay, well, let's never leave the house and let's never do anything because that can be really tempting. So I have to be careful that, like, you know, I still push myself, even if it's a Zoom party with friends where we just chat and catch up, or going for a walk outside can be really helpful just to leave the house, because it can be so tempting to never leave the house. And then the other way it sort of impacted me, and I'm still kind of coming to terms with this, is I think it has caused some new OCD symptoms where I'm very worried that like anything I feel in my body, maybe that's COVID. And I had to get a test recently because I was exposed to someone who tested positive, and even that negative test is not enough reassurance to tell me that, oh, well, it says it was negative, but what if it was wrong or it was too soon or whatever, like, and then I just go down that rumination cycle where it's like, I wish it could just be a cold again, but it's not. It could be a million things.
Thank you. I really relate to that, especially because my anxiety focuses a lot on like health anxiety. And so that particular piece of, am I getting sick? Are people I love getting sick? And then not being able to put that thought down, I get that. All right, go ahead, Kat.
So COVID was really interesting last year because I was finishing the medical assistant program over at Illinois Central College in Peoria. And we switched to online stuff in the middle of classes in the spring semester. Big thing that impacted is we didn't get some of the hands-on training we needed for learning how to do things, which kind of cheated me out of when I was doing job hunting last fall. It wasn't really too bad. It was definitely nerve-wracking. Like Morgan, I had a really strong base of coping mechanisms and support. The scariest thing was I got COVID in the middle of my externship with Unity Point. So I went for 2 weeks and it was scary because I was like, am I going to die from this? But I mean, I came out the other side and for me, it was felt like a flare up of a sinus infection. So I was very fortunate. And things that got me through COVID, the big thing I had was I had my long-term goals keeping me, you know, eyes focused on the future, finishing my program, getting employed, and starting to plan to move in together with my fiance. The other thing I kind of discovered last year that I didn't even know was a coping thing was I discovered positivity journaling, which is I got a journal and just had developed prompts for journaling to keep me focused on the positive and focus going forward and, you know, finding the good in a really crappy situation.
Thank you, Kat. All right, and Devin, your turn.
I would say for me, COVID impacted me negatively for school reasons because I'm the type of student I have to be in the class engaged. Like that's more of a learning environment to me than maybe my bedroom or my living room because that's where I was doing class from. So I just felt that I never was really getting a break from my environment. So that kind of put me in like a dark place because I had to limit my interaction with like the outside world. And so, you know, my support system did change a little bit because my best friend had a child within that time frame. And so to keep her and the newborn protected, of course, that was not someone I could physically go see and be around. So just not having, you know, somebody, you're already in a limited space and not being able to use those people, it wasn't a good thing for me. But I've learned to, like Kat says, you know, you have to keep your long-term goals like right here so that you don't stray away from what you have going for you in the future.
Awesome. All right, Amanda.
I think it was like a little bit of a mixed bag for me. You know, because oftentimes people who suffer with mental illness issues tend to isolate themselves. In some ways, like I would jokingly say, like, I've been training for this my whole life, you know? But as I said before, my, you know, two closest emotional support people live, you know, far away from me. So I already had well-established relationships, you know, through like our phones or whatever. And really those relationships got stronger, which was beautiful. I already had a counselor and a psychiatric nurse practitioner. So, you know, those things, those well-established relationships were easily transitioned to telehealth. Same with the, you know, I was going to NAMI Mid-Central in-person connection support groups, and, you know, NAMI Illinois started the online virtual support group, so I transitioned to that. But I mean, work-wise, it was really difficult. You know, I work in a support role to healthcare for a population that was disproportionately impacted by COVID. And it was some dark days for about the first 7 months. And I was really like worried about myself, you know? And I just had to like really focus on still sleeping well. I did like a food delivery service to make sure that I was eating well. And really loved the fact that now there's tons of online classes. Like before, I was only going to one yoga class on Sundays. And then, you know, now I have like a section of a room dedicated, I call it my yoga room. And at the peak, I was like going to like 4 classes a week, you know, when work was really stressful and things were really bad. You know, it certainly tapered off some as my life has gotten a little bit more back to normal. But I think that it was tough, and I was worried about myself. But I think it was the fact that I already had that support system in place.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right, and Sarah.
Yeah, I noticed in a lot of different ways, but the going virtual was probably the biggest thing at first, especially when therapy went virtual. It was very jarring, I think, at first to go from being in person with my therapist, being able to be very vulnerable with her, and then doing therapy over the computer, like in my house. It was very jarring, and it didn't feel personal at first, and it was really awkward. You know, with some time, and obviously I got used to it, and actually now I've just stuck with it. It makes it easier maintaining work and stuff. I can just do it over lunch. But at first it was really awkward. So there was a little bit of a transition period while I got used to that. And I mentioned, you know, like kickboxing, working out is something I have to do. I have to move my body in, you know, some way, even if it's just going for a walk or stretching, things like that. And that went virtual too, which was cool. The gym I go to, they did like virtual classes, but you know, I didn't have a bag at home. So there were aspects of it that I couldn't do, and so we had to become really creative. My husband and I came up with like this silly workout game that involved ping pong, and you know, when you lose a point or whatever, you have to do something. And so we just had to be creative with it and find other ways. I guess one of the biggest things that I had to deal with is, you know, when you deal with depression, anxiety, sometimes it can feel like the world is on fire at all times. And even when, you know, it's not, you wake up and the world just feels so big and complicated that you just can't even face it. And then, you know, the past 18 months, like you turn on the news and it looked like the world was on fire. So not only were you battling those things, but you were battling the fact that like you could see those things. And so it just made it extra hard, and still does, to really work through those symptoms and, you know, tell my brain, you know, hey, you know, it's okay, and to cope with those things, you know, to see, or to like, you know, think I'm saying that and it validate like the things that aren't true in my brain. You know, I've had to work harder to cope, and make it even more present in my life. So yeah.
I can totally relate to that, Sarah. I feel like my anxiety can make me think the world is ending when everything is okay. So when it actually looks like the world is ending, it's like, you know, a field day. So trying to do the normal anxiety stuff and the extra anxiety stuff is a lot. Some of the things I'm hearing about this are that for people who already had some stuff set up before COVID, that was super helpful to be able to keep doing those things. But that when those things changed shape, like going virtual, that was kind of a difficult spot. And I'm also hearing a lot of people talking about being really intentional about like specific ways that you can take care of yourself, like making sure to get enough sleep and checking in with some of those support people. And that it sounds like those have been some of the most helpful things for us. Awesome. So we are going to move into our lightning round, which is going to be 4 questions that people are going to answer just a little bit more quickly. So, yeah, I put this. Oops, I'm sorry. That was me knocking over one of my pens to find my sheet of who's answering what. All right. So, our first question is, what is one thing you wish that people understood about mental illness? So we're going to start with Devin.
Sorry. Okay. So one thing that I wish people understood was that mental illness does not make the person. So, you know, just be patient with people who are experiencing those things.
Awesome. All right, Morgan.
I would say that kids can experience it too. I know there's a fear of overdiagnosing, but kids can totally have mental illness and symptoms and all of that.
That reminds me of a post I saw recently about how not diagnosing kids doesn't mean that they don't have an illness. It just means that they don't understand what's happening. And so they think there's just something wrong with them instead of knowing like, oh, I have an illness. And Kat.
Big thing I want people to know, mental illness is not a personality defect. It's not a sign of lack of willpower. It is a biological disease process that's a chronic illness within the brain. It's nothing that is a reflection on you as a person. It's like asthma, diabetes, heart disease, hypertension, or sorry, I'm getting into my medical assistant jargon, high blood pressure. It's a very natural thing, and it's not anything that's a reflection of you.
Thank you. All right, our second question. What is one warning sign that you notice in yourself when you're struggling, that could be a clue that you need extra support? And we'll go back to you, Kat, for the first answer to this one.
I learned throughout my mental health journey that irritability and anxiety are some of my big signs that I'm swinging towards some more mania, or being hypomanic. When that happens, it's like, oh, okay, there's some stuff going on in the environment that's stressing me out. We need to figure out what that is and try and mitigate it as best we can.
All right, Morgan?
Yeah, the biggest warning sign for me is not wanting to do things I normally enjoy a lot. So not wanting to go to dance class or not wanting to go outside and garden. When I start to question, oh, should I go? Should I do this? It's like, oh, wait, something's happening here. Yes, you should definitely go and check in with other supports.
Awesome. And Sarah?
One of the biggest things I notice is when I start cutting corners in my self-care routine. And actually the biggest one I notice is when I stop brushing the knots out of my hair. You know, I have a lot of hair. It's really easy for there to be knots. And sometimes I'll go like multiple days where I just throw it up in a bun or whatever. And then I get like 4 days and it's impossible to brush it out. Yeah, it's been a couple. Okay, I probably should, you know, take a little extra care of myself because I couldn't even, you know, do that. And then the other one is feeling the kind of fatigue where it's like, I don't feel that enough rest will help. That when I start feeling that way, that it's like no rest will help, probably should change something up or seek more help or something like that.
Guessing that although we're not all answering this question, this is probably a question that everyone has an answer for. Like, I feel like the longer you spend struggling with your mental health, the more you start to notice like, oh, those are the things. And then when they pop up, you're like, okay, like, yes, I got to deal with that now. All right, question number 3 is about support. So what is one thing you would recommend to people who care about someone who's experiencing a mental health challenge? And first one for this is Devin.
One thing I would recommend would be to, once again, the whole patience thing, you know, just be patient with that person and check in, but don't be a bug about it. Like, don't take offense if like that person doesn't respond how they usually would, or, you know, just kind of take the response for what it is and, you know, let them come back around because they do need that time. So.
I really feel that. I feel like sometimes when I'm struggling, it's hard for me to reply to messages, but I really like getting the messages, you know, even if it takes me a couple days to actually answer them. All right, and Kat?
Big thing, and this is like something I learned in the last year, is if you're dealing with somebody who's dealing with major depression, suicide, or whatever, just, you know, practice active listening and, you know, validate how they're feeling. You don't have to understand what they're going, you don't have to relate to what they're going through, but it's like, hey, I hear you, I see you, I don't get it completely, but you are completely valid in what you're feeling. And, you know, it's understandable given stuff that's going on right now. And that's something really powerful if you can just let that person know that they're not insane for feeling the way they feel.
Yeah, I think that can make so much difference. You're right, like even if you don't really get it, to just say like I care about you and what you feel matters. And last one for this question is Amanda.
I would say ask the person, you know, what you can do to support them. You know, I think sometimes, you know, people tend to be like problem solvers. And so, you know, you take a, you know, you're struggling. And so you go to talk to somebody about it and they're like, oh, you should just do this, 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 and this, you know, sometimes that's not helpful. Sometimes we're looking for exactly what Kat's talking about, just somebody to listen and like validate that we're feeling normal. So I would say like, you know, asking the person, you know, what they need or what you can do to be supportive. Maybe it's like running an errand for them or making a phone call for them to take a little bit of pressure off. And I think that like I can't like put an exclamation point on what Devin said like any stronger, that you know, the tendency to isolation is really strong, you know. And I know there have been times where I've just felt so alone, and like the people in my life, like knowing and understanding that just because I didn't respond doesn't mean they shouldn't send another text message to just say like, hey, I'm thinking of you, you know, whenever you feel like you can, you know, give me a call, or just, you know, people can, even if we don't reply, it doesn't mean that we don't want to hear from you.
All right. So this is our last question. What is one thing you would say to people who might be watching who are struggling with their mental health right now? So I'll go back to you, Amanda.
I would say to reach out for support, you know, reach out to the people that like have earned your trust, that you can share what's going on in your life. Reach out to those people. You know, I really can't say enough about all the support that I've gotten from NAMI, you know, with the virtual support groups on Mondays and Thursdays. I would say like focusing on progress and not perfection. That's been my mantra right now, and trying to quit smoking. You know, after smoking for 30 years and having a mood disorder, which means I'm 3 times more likely to be a cigarette smoker, like focusing on, you know, the progress of, hey, I went 7 days without smoking. That's really awesome, you know, that it doesn't have to be perfect. And I would say, like, I take kind of a kitchen sink approach, you know, where like I will try any and everything to feel and be well. You know, like Kat talked about getting her nails done, you know, like I've done acupuncture, like I will do all the things as long as it doesn't counteract with the medication that I take. And then I think the biggest thing is not to give up on yourself. When I think about like how the, you know, 2017 and 2018 were for me, when I look at that time period, like I'm trying not to cry, but I can't believe I survived that. And I just didn't give up on myself. Even when I gave up on psychiatrists and I gave up on medications and I gave up on, you know, I never gave up on myself, and I never gave up trying. And that's the one thing that I will, you know, that I hope everybody, just don't give up on yourself, because you're worth it. You're worth it to get well, and you will get well.
That makes me want to cry too, because that's around the time that we met, and it's been really cool to see you get to where you are now. And
Thank you.
yeah, it's like it's hitting me too. All right, and our last answer for the day is Sarah.
The number one thing that I would say to somebody who's struggling right now is that you're not alone, and you're not a burden. It can feel like a lot, and then, you know, you're looking at the world around you and you feel like you're being a lot sometimes. And, you know, I've felt that way. I continue to feel that way sometimes. So, you know, whether or not you're already seeking help, you want to seek help, maybe you're not ready to, that's okay. I just want to validate wherever you're sitting. That's okay. You know, recovery is a process, and it can be a long process to figure out what works for you, what doesn't work for you, all of those things. And, you know, through it all, you're not a burden, and you're not alone in it.
Awesome. I want to thank you guys so much. This was an awesome conversation, and I just really appreciate you being willing to share that, you know, with me and with each other, but also with like whoever might be watching, because that's a hard thing to do. And I think it was really helpful for us to just kind of see that while mental illness can affect each of us differently, there is a lot of stuff that we have in common. I saw a lot of people like nodding at each other's answers to be like, oh yeah, that's me too. And I think it's just a really good reminder of, what you said, Sarah, about how we're not alone, even if sometimes we feel like we are. So yeah, I really appreciate that. We talked about a couple different kinds of resources today that might be helpful for people, such as, doctors, counseling, support groups, different kinds of therapy. I just want to recommend to anyone who's watching, if you are wondering about what resources are available in Mclean County or in Central Illinois, one of the best ways to find out about that is by calling Path Crisis Center at 211. They have a database with lots of information about many kinds of resources. So if you're looking for support, that is a great place to get started. And if you're looking for a support group specifically focusing on mental health, the support groups that Amanda mentioned are a fabulous option. I've been involved with those as well. You can find those by Googling NAMI Illinois support groups. To find the local NAMI chapter, you can search for NAMI Mid-Central Illinois. You're also welcome to reach out to me if you'd like some more information about where to find those groups and what they can do. All right, Kevin, were there any questions from the audience for us?
So not yet, but I will open it up right now to everyone in the audience. If you have questions for our panelists, please go ahead and put that into the question box right now. In addition, I'm going to put my own contact information. If you do have questions for any of our panelists that you want to ask them later, you can direct those questions to me, and I will reach out to these individuals and get a response for you. Also in the chat, I'm going to be putting, as promised, our website link so that you can register for future events. And then also the link for our YouTube page so that you can share this presentation with others if you found value in it, as well as view any of our other presentations, not just from this year's forum sessions, but also from last year's as well. So there's that in the chat. We did have a couple of comments that said, I'm glad you covered personal warning signs. We have to know ourselves and we can't work on what we don't notice. And then also, this is really good. I wasn't sure what to expect. So it sounds like people weren't sure what this panel was going to be like, but they've been really happy to hear you guys all share your stories and to share a little bit of your information about how you deal with your various mental health concerns. Yeah, so it looks like a lot of people are just kind of saying, thank you for the experience, but I don't see any questions at this time. So with that being said, I want to thank everyone for being in attendance today. Thank you again to all of our panelists for speaking today and sharing your own stories and experiences. I know that's not always easy to do, but there's really a ton of value in it for our community members. So we really appreciate that. And then thank you again to all of our attendees today. Again, please check out our website to register for upcoming forum sessions. Everyone enjoy the weather out there today. I think it's still kind of sunny, but it's pretty frigid, so make sure you stay warm. And we hope to see you at the next event.